in the heart of Westfield County, where polished government buildings towered over bustling sidewalks, an old man sat alone on a courthouse bench. He had been there for hours, unmoving except for the occasional shifting of his cane, a weathered stick of oak, worn smooth by years of use and miles of memories. Harold Dalton was his name, though no one had asked in a long time. To passers-by, he was just another aging drifter. Gray beard, deep wrinkles, military coat too large for his shoulders, boots too old for the season. The 1st Infantry Division patch stitched to his left sleeve had faded into an unrecognizable smudge. The other sleeve, though, still bore one word, embroidered carefully: Valor. Every morning, the town's rhythm flowed past him. Attorneys with coffee, interns on e-scooters, reporters eager for courtroom drama. None paused for the old man with the manila envelope held tightly to his chest. Only one person ever spoke to him. "Morning, Mr. Dalton," said Ms. Cartwright, the town librarian, as she crossed the square on her way to work. She never missed a day, and Harold always responded with a quiet nod. But that day, she noticed something different. His hands trembled more than usual. The envelope he clutched was torn at the edges, smudged by rain and fingerprints. Inside was something personal, something heavy. Inside the grand courtroom of Westfield County, a trial was underway. A real estate tycoon named Everett Vaughn was being prosecuted for defrauding millions from federal funds earmarked for veteran housing programs. The irony. The gallery was filled with well-dressed spectators, reporters, and politicians giving speeches about honor and sacrifice. And no one noticed Harold Dalton enter through the rear doors. He walked with difficulty, the cane echoing sharply across the marble floor. He found the last row of seats, left side, back corner, and lowered himself slowly, the envelope never leaving his lap. A young associate leaned toward the bailiff. "That man in the back, is he allowed to be here?" The bailiff approached, out of obligation, but hesitated as soon as he met Dalton's eyes. Calm, quiet, and immovable. Without a word, he turned away. Something about the old man made it impossible to proceed. It was during a recess that Judge Margaret Ellison noticed him. She was scanning her files, sipping lukewarm coffee, when her eyes drifted toward the rear of the courtroom. She saw the coat first, then the patch, and then her heart froze. "Dalton," she murmured aloud, almost to herself. The whisper grew wings. Spectators turned. The name repeated like a ripple. She stood from the bench, descended the dais, and walked directly toward him. "Private First Class Harold Dalton?" she asked again, louder this time. He raised his eyes, and for a moment, the years peeled back. They weren't judge and stranger anymore. They were 2 young soldiers beneath a collapsing building in Baghdad, 2004, bleeding and terrified. "Ma'am," he said simply, his voice like gravel worn smooth by time. "You're alive," she said, stunned. "We thought you didn't make it." "You weren't the only one." A long silence followed. When she returned to her seat, Judge Ellison took off her glasses, wiped her eyes, and addressed the court with a voice still shaking. Before continuing the case, Judge Ellison tapped the microphone. "Members of the court, before we proceed, I ask that we take a moment. There's someone in this room whose name may not appear in your newspapers or headlines, but who is the reason I stand here today." She looked back at Dalton, who still hadn't moved. Private Harold Dalton was a combat medic during the Iraq War. In 2004, during a mortar strike, He pulled me and 6 others out of a collapsed school being used as a shelter. I had shrapnel in my back. Corporal Ruiz had no legs left. Dalton carried us both. Gasps spread through the gallery. Someone in uniform removed his hat, pressing it to his chest. No one gave him a medal that day. No camera crews, no public speeches. But every life saved was because of him. She turned to the defense attorney, a young man in an expensive suit who was flipping pages in sudden discomfort. This man has come today not to testify for himself, but for others. For veterans who've had their homes stolen, their aid siphoned. I'll hear what he has to say. Dalton stood with difficulty. His cane groaned as he leaned on it, his left knee barely bending. From the envelope, he pulled out a folded letter, creases worn thin from years of keeping it close. It's from Corporal Ruiz, he said. Died in 2006. Wrote this before he passed. Told me to give it to any judge who ever heard a case where someone hurt our people. I never thought I'd get the chance. The courtroom stilled. Dalton opened the letter and read, voice raspy but unbroken. If you're reading this, someone forgot what the uniform means. Not the one you wear, but the one you carry in your heart. If money was taken from our wounded, our homeless, our brothers, then shame on them. But if justice can still stand, even in silence, then maybe this fight ain't lost. He folded the letter carefully, hands shaken, and sat back down. No one clapped. No one dared. The silence was its own kind of salute. The trial resumed the next day. The verdict, guilty on all counts. The sentence, maximum penalty allowed. But that wasn't the story that gripped the nation. The real headline was what happened afterward. War hero emerges from the shadows to deliver justice in courtroom. Dalton was identified in military records, twice decorated, once recommended for the Silver Star, which he declined. He'd slipped into civilian life quietly after his discharge, never taking credit, never asking for help. He'd worked odd jobs, lived in a small trailer, and volunteered at the VA until arthritis took his hands. Reporters found him, begged for interviews. He refused. When asked for a statement, he said only, just doing what Ruiz would have done. Within a week, Westfield Courthouse installed a brass plaque on the last bench of the left row, Dalton's bench. It read, reserved for those who show up quietly and stand louder than any gavel. Visitors began leaving small tokens there, medals, folded notes, patches from old units. Ms. Cartwright from the library brought coffee every Thursday. She never interrupted him, just left it beside his cane. Sometimes he'd sit in silence for hours. Other times, he'd talk to young veterans visiting the building. He never told war stories. He asked about them. Dalton passed quietly in his sleep that following winter. He left behind no family, just a small footlocker of mementos, and a note handwritten in the same calm hand. If I'm remembered, let it be for the ones who didn't come home. I was only ever carrying them. At his memorial, Judge Ellison spoke again. He was the last one standing from his unit, but he never stood for himself, only for the memory of others. The ceremony concluded with 6 young service members folding the flag over Dalton's casket. 2 of them had met him on that courthouse bench. Some walk into rooms and demand to be seen. Others sit silently in the back until the moment comes to speak louder than any title or nameplate. Harold Dalton was the second kind. And now, when someone sees that last bench in the courtroom, empty, polished by time, glowing with morning light, they know it's not just a seat. It's a reminder that the bravest voices often whisper, that justice sometimes limps in quietly, and that not all heroes wear medals. Some carry folded letters, a cane, and the weight of silence.